About 9 o'clock. I say we can go ahead and get going. Good morning, everyone. Get my cameras right. Um, so today I wanted to go over, we're just going to do a little review on the AVID. I've had some questions coming up lately on that one. And we'll go over some disclosure requirements. But mostly we're going to be going over some updates we've made in Paperless Pipeline with the checklist. And just wanted to kind of go over that. Plus, just, getting your transaction started in Paperless Pipeline, um, and how it helps us get through the checklist a little faster with just a little extra setup on, the beginning part when you're doing the file creation. So, but mostly we're going to be looking at the new checklists and how they work and things like that. There hasn't been more added. It's just, I think it's going to be a little clearer now on what's required and what's not required. So we'll go over that. But first, we have Gary with Tried True Home Loans, and he's going to give us the mortgage update for this week. How's it going, Gary?
Doing good. Travis, thanks for having me on again.
Yep.
Let me share my screen just to confirm you can see the meeting
Yep.
8:11. Yeah.
811.
All right, cool. When I do the share screen, it always takes the chat away, and then I can't see if people have the questions or stuff. So I'm actually going in there right now so that if you do have any questions, reach out. So anyway, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being on the meeting this morning. So before we jump in, just a quick reminder. I'm with the Tried and True Home Loans, which is a sister company of Rise Realty. So Travis is our broker, and it would be great if we could keep the business in-house going forward. So if you do have any um, clients who need to get pre-approved or need a second opinion on their financing or just have questions about what's possible, reach out to someone in the Tried and True home loan company. And to find us, you just go in the back office and you'll see the Tried and True Home Loans logo. Just click that link and that takes you to our contact information. So reach out to one of the loan officers at Tried and True Home Loans. So as we get started, also feel free to use the chat to drop any questions, comments, or insights as we go so that we can keep this meeting interactive. And the more that you engage, the more value we all get. But just make sure that the chat is set to everyone because sometimes it's set to hosts and panelists, so all the people can't see it. So just make sure if you do a chat, set the to everyone. Okay. So this is the 30-year fix for now. We're down a little bit from last Monday. It's not quite an eighth of a point, but close to eighth of a point. So last Monday, I was talking about the jobless reports, and for July, it was not quite as good as people expected. So and bad economic data is actually good for rates because if the economy is not doing well, then people take money from the stock market and put it into the 10-year treasury bonds, which helps the mortgage rates. So if the jobless claims are not good, then it actually helps rates. So July wasn't that great, it wasn't that bad, but then they did a revised estimate for May and June, and they brought the numbers down by about 250,000 jobs. So this has been helping us the last couple of weeks, and you'll see that in the drop. Um, so it's probably what about a quarter of a point in the last couple of weeks that we've dropped. So it's all good. So this is where we're at right now on the 30-year conventional. On the FHA again, we've dropped down, not quite as much as an eighth, but close on the FHA. VA, as always, is following the FHA numbers. and then the 15-year kind of a little flat right now. It was doing quite well, and then it's gone a bit flat the past week or so. And then the jumbo is just under 6.75. So that's also doing well. So just to give you an idea of what a jumbo mortgage is, we have the FHA loan limits for each county. And I've just done the counties in Southern California. I know that we have some agents across the state. So if you want to know what the FHA loan limit is in your county, just to reach out and I'll get those numbers to you. So, for example, in Orange County, a jumbo loan is a loan that's $1 or more higher than $1,209,750. I don't know why they just can't make it around 1,210,000, but hey. In San Diego, it's $1 or more higher than 1,077,550, and in the Riverside, $1 or more higher than 672,750 on a one unit. These are 2, 3, and 4 unit properties. So, like I was saying, on the reports so far, we've had the jobless claims for July. So the feds look at two factors when they determine policy. One is the jobless claims, and the other is inflation. And the CPI report, the Consumer Price Index report, comes out tomorrow morning. And so we'll see next Monday how things are with that report. There's obviously people who are always predicting things, and some are saying that they expect the inflation rate to go higher because of the tariffs that are in place right now. So we'll see what happens with that. But again, if the inflation rate goes higher, then the Feds don't like that. They want to get down to as close to 2 as possible. So if the inflation is going higher, we cannot really expect a rate cut sometime soon. So it's going to be interesting what happens tomorrow morning. So that's with the rates. And then my subject for this week is going to be trigger leads. So trigger leads are basically what happens when I run credit or a loan officer runs credit on a mortgage application, and it goes to the three bureaus, Experian and Equifax and TransUnion, and then they send me back the credit report. But what happens is they keep that data and they sell it to whoever wants it. And so then what happens is these people who are buying this data are buying it because they want to contact the borrower and try and get their business. And so what happens in the end quite often is you get the borrowers and they're getting blasted by these phone calls. And sometimes it's quite nasty. They get a lot of calls, and they get calls from people who are promising things that really they can't do, but it's like a bait and switch type thing. Their moral compass isn't maybe the best. And a bit like the expired listings, when you get the expired listings and then that next morning they get blasted by realtors trying to get their business. Well, this is what happens with the trigger leads. So I got an email just recently from the California Association of Mortgage Professionals, and it was talking about the passage of the Homebuyer Privacy Protection Act. And so far in June, the House passed it. It was here. This landmark legislation is approved by the House of Representatives in June. And then on August 2nd, they were celebrating that the Senate also passed this bill. So this bill is basically to ban trigger leads. It's going to stop the big three from selling the data of the borrower and to stop the trigger leads. It's been tried for years and years and years, but it seems this time around, it should pass. Both have passed it, and it's saying in this context, I'm not sure what the question mark's all about, but it's saying in this context that all it needs now is to go to the president's desk for signing. But my research is showing that it still needs a little bit of work done to it, but hopefully sometime this year it's going to get signed into law, and so we will not be getting any more trigger leads. But what can we do in the meantime to kind of reduce the threat of these leads being done? And so the best option until this law passes is to use this website. As it says, it's the official consumer credit reporting industry website, and it accepts and processes the requests from consumers to obtain or opt out of firm offers of credit or insurance. So this is basically the do not call list for loans, and it's free to do it. The borrower just goes to this website and puts in their information, and then they are out of the loop for 5 years. So under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the consumer credit reporting companies are allowed to include the names on lists used by creditors or insurers to make firm offers of credit, which is basically a trigger lead. So they can do that legally at the moment. So this bill hopefully stops that. So at the moment, the best option for the borrowers to do is to get onto this website as early as possible in the process, because it normally takes, even going through the website, it normally takes a few days to take effect. So if you come to me, say, with a borrower and say, I need a pre-approval and I've got to do a hard pull, it could cause trigger leads, which is not what people want. You saw the image. It's just not a pleasant experience. So if we have a few more days to get them onto this website and get them out of that system, it would be a lot better. And while we're talking about this, it's also a good thing for you guys too, to go on there on the website and opt out now. It costs you nothing. And so if you do run credit in the future and forget to do this, it means you will probably be getting phone calls from lenders. And like I said, just go on there and use this website. So if we're not doing this, then what are the other options to prevent the trigger leads? You know, the best one is this website, optoutprescreen.com. There's another one, dmachoice.org, which stops the email marketing and the direct mail. And then there's the donotcall.gov, which is to stop the telemarketing calls. But we all know from experience that this doesn't work. I mean, we all get blasted with phone calls, so it doesn't really work. The other option would be to do a soft pull. And last week we had on the lender UWM, and they have a system actually where we can go on their system and go through most of the process using a soft pull. But at some point, we still have to do a hard pull. And once the hard pull is done, it starts with the trigger leads. So we still have to have the optoutprescreen.com done at some point until this bill passes. So we can do a soft pull, which will not cause the trigger leads, but then we can just hold off on the hard pull, just gather the docs and commitments. But at some point, we got to do it. And then there's some questionable ways of doing it, like on the application, when I submit for the credit, you know, people say, oh, take out off the phone number and email address, so that when you submit, no one's getting that information. It might work a little bit, but in most of the cases, they'll still find ways to get the phone number and contact information. So again, not perfect. Another way that people are saying is to change the loan type. So if we're doing a purchase for, and it's a $500,000 loan, for example, change the loan type to a HELOC for 20K and then run the credit. It's questionable if this is compliant, and it's not really ideal either. I'd rather not go that route. And then the other option is if they don't do the uptype prescreen.com, just let them know that they will be getting phone calls. I mean, it's pretty strong that they will. So just let them know that. And then last week we had UWM on, and they mentioned this free realtor training trip. So it's in Pontiac, Michigan, and they cover the flight and hotel and food. You got to pay to get to the airport, and from the airport in Detroit to the hotel in Pontiac. And I'm allowed to take a maximum of 3 realtors per trip. So I'm looking for 3 per trip. So if you want to do this at some point, just reach out to me and we'll try and schedule a group of us. It's going to be better going in a group because then you guys can collaborate, share ideas, and talk about what you've learned. So if you want to do it, this is free basically. And the agenda it's just a 1 day. It's a Wednesday, so you'd fly out Tuesday, fly back Thursday. And this is kind of the agenda for the day. And as you see, I pulled this yesterday. Most of the seats are gone until the end of September. I'm not sure what's going on here. Is that Labor Day week that no one wants to go? So we either have Labor Day week or at the moment, the end of September going into October. So if you guys want to do that, reach out and let me know. And I'll try and get it sorted out. And if you need to contact me, this is my contact information. If you want to scan the QR code, it'll go directly into your phone and it's saved there. But thank you for your time, and that's all I've got for now. And I'm going to have to find the way to unshare my screen. Stop share.
All right, thanks for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good info on the trigger leads, because it almost comes across that the lender sold their information, because it happens usually right after the credit pull. And I actually had that happen to me a few months back where the agent that I was working with on a loan after we pulled the credit, called me up and said, "Hey, they're getting the borrowers are getting blasted by phone calls from these other lenders, and they're upset, because their information got sold and this and that." I said, "Look, that's not us." I said that's the credit companies actually selling their information, and so they were a little upset, but to avoid that kind of stuff, sometimes just being proactive helps avoid those types of, um, I don't want to call it a complaint, but gripes or whatever you want to call it, when that does happen, because it will. If they're not on that registry, they are going to get blasted with phone calls from other lenders, and a lot of them are very, very aggressive because they pay big money for those, and usually it's going to be those retail lenders that we were talking about last week, and they have quotas to hit, those guys, for applications. So they're very aggressive. All right, sounds good. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen. We're going to flip around a little bit. I thought I'd start today with just a kind of a refresher on AVID, because there are questions that come up with this, and do I have to, and this and that. And actually, yes, it is a law that agents are required to do a visual inspection of the property if it's a single family 1 to 4 sale. Um, is the AVID form the only form you can use? Not necessarily, but that is what C.A.R has basically set up to help protect us and provide the best visual inspection reporting um, to have on file, essentially. So, yes, the agent has a duty to inspect and disclose. And remember, this is called the agent visual inspection disclosure. So, being that it's a disclosure, we'll look at that a few pages down. So when sale of residential property, 1 to 4 units. Who? Brokers representing buyers and seller. What? Must conduct a reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection of the accessible areas of the property offered for sale. Must disclose to the prospective buyer material facts and defects that should have been discovered during the inspection. How? An agent completes the TDS and or the AVID form on behalf of the broker. So yes, this is, essentially part of the TDS. Up in the section 1 of the first page of the TDS, it asks if, there's anything that the agent wants to report or attach an AVID. Usually attaching the AVID is the better option there, so that you can report on each and every aspect of the home. And it shows that you were in each of the rooms that you could access. Forms TDS and AVID. So even though the law that created this obligation does not create a separate form upon which to make the disclosure, a sister law created the real estate transfer disclosure statement, form TDS. So although most of that form concerns seller disclosures, sections 3 and 4 can be used for the agent to make disclosures. C.A.R created agent visual inspection disclosure, the AVID, that alternatively may be used to document the agent's inspection. What are the advantages of the AVID? So there's several advantages to using the AVID rather than the TDS. First, AVID offers much more space to disclose and room by room sections that guide an agent through the inspection process. If the AVID is used, the applicable box should be checked on the TDS, which is in that section 1, first page at the top. Another advantage of using the AVID is that the broker's inspection and disclosure obligations apply even when the seller is exempt from completing a TDS, which is rare, but some sales are exempt from TDS. Using the AVID gets agents in the habit of always conducting inspections and making disclosures of residential 1 to 4 properties without being dependent on the TDS. Disclosures made after an inspection should be specific but not speculative. Agents should identify only what can be seen. Agents should not guess as to a causation, degree of danger, cost of remedial activity, or identify any technical terms. So as you're going through, you don't want to say, that crack on the floor is caused by, settling. You would just say, there's a crack on the floor in the kitchen. The AVID aids agents in making the legally required disclosures, but also specifies what is outside the scope of agent's duty. For example, there is no statutorily required obligation to search offsite records such as permits, inspection of common areas, or gain access to inaccessible areas such as attics or crawl spaces, or look under furniture or carpet, open locked doors, or climb onto roofs or into chimneys. So it's strictly visual. You're not moving anything. If there's a bunch of boxes stacked in the corner, they stay in the corner. You just, it's a visual inspection. The chat is open if you have questions on this. I know the questions do come up on the AVID. Go ahead and throw those in there and I'll answer them as we go. So again, what type of property is the visual inspection required for? Residential 1 to 4 and mobile homes. Those Those are in there as well. This includes transactions even when exempt from the TDS, such as probate or REO. The visual inspection is not required on commercial, vacant land, or 5+ residential property. How does the agent conduct the visual inspection? Agent must conduct a diligent visual inspection and disclose all facts materially affecting its value or desirability. And that's a question you can ask yourself too. Is this thing that I'm noting here, is this going to affect the value or desirability? So just keep those words in your head as you're doing your visual inspection. Above all, the agent should identify red flags such as cracks, stains, discolorations, spots, peeling paint, popcorn ceilings, hillside netting, or uneven or warping flooring. Is the agent required to investigate inaccessible areas? No, so we're not going in the attics. You don't have to climb down a steep hill or up a steep incline in the backyard. Um, Basically safety. The inspection is limited to reasonably and normally accessible areas. There's no need to climb up hillsides, onto the roof, or into the attic, move or look under or behind furniture. You don't have to pull the couch out or anything like that. You don't have to get into the cabinets or open locked doors. Even if the bedroom is locked, it's an inaccessible area at that time, so you're not going to do the AVID in that portion. You would just make a note, bedroom 3 on the right side of the hallway was locked and inaccessible. So that way there, it shows that you made an attempt, but you couldn't access. What are the rules of thumb for conducting a visual inspection? Essentially, just stick to the facts. Do not speculate or assume. For example, you may say green and black discoloration in bathroom 1. Do not say mold of the toxic variety. You don't know if it's toxic, or surface mold. You don't know how deeply it penetrates. That would be speculative. Or easily cleaned. You don't know exactly what remediation effort is necessary. Or caused by a leak in the caulking. You're not offering an opinion as to the cause. You're just stating there's discoloration in the bathroom, wherever, behind the toilet, next to the tub, whatever. In fact, it's better not to state mold at all. As an agent, you should not make the determination whether the subject property contains mold or asbestos or other environmental hazards. Do not guess at the adequacy of repairs, such as saying the repair work looks solid. What if it turns out they aren't? Stay away from loose language such as no problems whatsoever. Obviously, there could be, and remodeled all over. That is not a good comment to put on any line in there. Because really, was it truly remodeled everywhere? We don't know that. Um, do not attempt to use visual inspection for marketing or puffery. The house is already sold. This is just straight facts, and that's all you're noting down on the paper. Let's see. Stay away from adjectives or size or for size or significance. When identifying cracks, stains, paint, damage spots, etc., do not attempt to quantify or otherwise describe the size, significance, or degree of a defect. For example, do not say hairline crack, small crack, or severe crack. So you'll just say, again, crack in the floor, next to the sink in the kitchen or something like that. You can describe where it's at, but not the crack itself, just that there is a crack there. Do not endorse seller statements. Avoid saying, I agree with the seller's portion of the TDS, or make other remarks such as, I do not see anything which contradicts seller statements. This is your own visual inspection to report on. So we're not relying on the seller or, home inspections that were viewed or anything like that. When does the AVID need to be performed? And so this is a big one. I see this happening a lot of times at the end of the transaction. Sometimes they're trying to do it with the walkthrough or as the final walkthrough, and that is definitely not the way to do the AVID or when to do the AVID. That is frankly too late because, like I said, this is a disclosure. So if you are disclosing stuff that late in the transaction, that can trigger problems with your sale potentially because you are disclosing facts that can be material to the sale. So, and if something hadn't been brought up before and you're just now saying it a couple days before closing, you can see how that can bring about a problem. Um, so it needs to be performed and delivered according to the applicable timelines in the RPA and prior to the release of the contingencies. That would be the very latest time to do it. You do not want to send over an AVID after contingencies have been released. Because again, this is a disclosure that you're making, just as with all the other disclosures that have been made about the property. So you'll see if we're looking at the RPA right here, section 11, statutory and other disclosures, including lead-based paint hazards and cancellation rights. So if we look at number 2, the real estate transfer disclosure statement required by this paragraph is considered fully complete if the seller has completed the section titled coordination with other disclosure forms by checking a box section 1, and seller has completed and answered all questions and signed the seller's information section 2. That's where they have all the check boxes. And the seller's agent, if any, has completed and signed the seller's agent section 3 of the TDS, or if applicable, an agent visual inspection disclosure, car form AVID. So you're seeing that they're looping in your duty to inspect with the TDS and statutory disclosures and the law that pertains to it. So this needs to be done along with the seller disclosures at that time. So if you're taking a listing, I would do the AVID, at the listing appointment, especially if you are providing disclosures up front. The NorCal agents, you definitely want to have that AVID done at that time because you don't want to send over all the seller disclosures and then, 10 days into the transaction, now here comes along your AVID, you know? So, um, this is a really important part because I see a lot of AVIDs going out after contingency release being used as just, you know, I have to turn in this form, but actually there's a lot of liability for us to do this uh, on the correct timelines and to do them correctly as well. So, yeah, so listing side, you can see we're looking at the RPA again in the grid section. In the N section, this is the seller performance section. N1, seller delivery of documents. So this all needs to be provided by default within 7 days after acceptance of the offer. So that's really the latest that you should be doing your AVID and sending it over, is within those 7 days of delivery. Otherwise, you're causing the seller to be in default, really, because you're making them go past the 7 day timeline for turning over all the seller disclosures, which includes, according to paragraph 2 here, the agent's visual inspection. On the buyer side, yes, you also have to do an AVID. L3, they need to be done within 17 days. So you should be sending over, if you're going to ask your buyer to release all contingencies in 17 days, um, or whatever timeline you set forth there, uh, but it's default 17, your AVID needs to be in there too. Because if you are doing the AVID and your buyer has to sign the AVID, and there's something on the AVID that maybe they didn't notice, maybe the home inspector didn't notice, it wasn't disclosed by the seller, and they've released their contingencies, you can see what a bind that can put you in now because they've released their contingencies, and now you're like, oh, here's my Avid, and here's what I saw. That's a material fact of this home, you know? So that needs to be done prior to the buyer releasing their contingency. So during the investigation of property timeline there. Um, any questions on that before we kind of move on? Um, a question would be if you are dual agency, do you perform two? In that instance, you are just going to provide the listing side. You don't have to do one on the listing side and the buyer side. You can just provide the listing side one. All right. So if we don't have any questions on Avid, I am going to pop over to required disclosures real quick. So this comes direct from C.A.R. And these are based on laws and contracts. So some disclosures are required by law, some are required by the contract, and some of them are just risk management. Um, so the green that they have here on their disclosure checklist, this is for single family 1 to 4 units. This does include a mobile or manufactured home, same stuff. You can see that it's statutorily or contractually required. The TDS is a statutory requirement. So that is a requirement on all sales 1 to 4, unless they happen to be exempt, which is a very small amount of them. And when the contract, the RPA states that if a TDS is required, then also the SPQ is required. So that is actually in the purchase agreement. So that is contractually required when the TDS is required. Now, if it is a TDS exempt property, then you're going to be looking at the ESD, which is the exempt seller disclosure. That is in lieu of the TDS. It's a very kind of bare minimum disclosure that can be filled out. And then you'll want to also include with that the WHSD. Um, those two things would be required if a property is exempt from TDS. You can see the AVID is right here at the top as well as a required statutory or contractually obligated disclosure. ASQS or AB, so that's your FERPTA. So you're usually going to get that from escrow at the end. So that stuff, especially if you don't want to have your sellers do that. If you feel more comfortable having escrow do that, that can be done through escrow. Just make sure that you do get it. NHDs always required. You got to have the natural hazard disclosure on all your sales. Um, some other notable ones, Megan's Law, it's required, but it's also in the purchase agreement. So you don't necessarily have to have the DBD as a required document because it is in the purchase agreement. However, I put it in the checklist as an advised document, meaning I would like to see it. We're not going to hold up your file or anything like that if you don't have the DBD, but I like to get it. And the reason why I like to have it on a separate form is because, as you know, more than likely the buyers have not read through this whole contract as they're signing it. They get their DocuSign, they hit, all the little signature tags, and then they're done. Or they might review the first few pages in the grid section, making sure the purchase price is right, their credit and their commission and stuff like that. And then the rest of the stuff is just a bunch of language that they probably don't want to read. And that's where it is. If you include a separate DBD, the Megan's Law Database advisory, then it brings it to their attention. And why is that important? Well, we've had a couple instances where we had an upset client because They didn't know about this. One of them was um, we were on the buyer side, and we closed the sale. There wasn't anything, required for disclosing, but the seller was on the list, the Megan's Law database, and the buyer was in education. And when they moved in, they found out that the seller was on the database and kind of freaked out on us because they felt that maybe their job was going to be in jeopardy because now they were living in that house that was associated, which was going to get corrected later on. But would they have bought that house if they knew that up front? It's maybe, maybe not. They could have stopped them from buying the house if they would have known that up front. So, that was kind of a post-closing complaint that came in, and everything ended up being just fine. Um, but because of that, it's good to have this one separate one page get signed by your client so that it just brings it to their attention a little bit more because this is a required disclosure from the state. Buyer's inspection advisory, the PRBS, these are all included in the RPA package, which is why I say don't break that up. All the agency and advisories and all of that included in with the RPA, those are in there for a reason to help protect us because some of those are, as you can see, statutorily required for us to have signed. Fair appraisal notice. So these other ones in yellow are statutorily and contractually required if applicable. So, they don't apply in every single case. The SPT, I like to get that on every single file that we're representing the buyer on because if it's their first time making a home purchase, they don't know about the supplemental tax, and that can be a very large bill that they get a few months after the purchase that completely throws them off. They're upset with you, they're upset with escrow. Why was I notified about this? If you've been in sales for a little while, you have probably received that call from your buyer client. So the SPT is one way to avoid getting that call months down the line saying, why do I have a $6,000 tax bill? Um, the ESD we just went over. FHDS, that is the high fire. Um, and then, I'm not going to go through all these. There's a lot, but you can see that they have a list of what is required and when and why. And this is how we build our checklists in pipeline as well. And we don't have a lot of extra requirement. Like I said, the Megan's Law database, I like to have it because we have seen some post-closing complaints come up of buyers being upset because they didn't know. So that is why we put some of that stuff on there. Even if the other broker says we're not going to have it signed or, because it's in the purchase agreement, we shouldn't be trying to get out of, disclosure essentially. The more we have, the better it is. So if that comes up, just have our side sign it and put it in the file and just make a note, seller would not sign or whatever. So that's all you need to do. So on that note, let's flip over to pipeline. So hopefully you can see my screen. This is home page of what a user account would look like in pipeline. And what we're going to do is just create a little transaction here up here in the top right. And your location should be set. We're just going to do a test address. It is better if you can put in the full address with the city and the zip. That really helps us out on our end when you do that. This You don't have to put in the MLS. That's not a requirement. You can see that the full property address is. Status. So you'll want to look at the statuses and say, okay, what am I working on here? Am I wanting to turn in my buyer rep agreement to the brokerage? I just had it signed, which you should be. You would click the active status. That is a active buyer making offers. And you can put your other stuff in there too. You can put your pre-approval letter, your proof of funds. We are going to require that later anyways, so you might as well just put them in then. If it is a new listing, you're going to put it in active coming soon status, meaning I just listed this property and it's on the market. It's in MLS. So don't wait until you get an offer to turn in your listing paperwork. If you're waiting, we can't properly supervise if you're turning in these things last minute and late. We need to have the listing agreement ASAP after you take the listing. That is also a California law that it needs to be turned over to the broker as quickly as possible. I believe theirs is 3 days. So if it is a sale, so you're repping the buyer, um, you're going to put in pending sale, meaning you have an acceptance. So let's say you didn't put in your buyer in active status in the beginning. You just held on to your BRBC, but now you have an acceptance with your purchase agreement. You want to start your file. You're going to go pending sale. So let's just let's start with active so you can see. You'll also need to select a label here. So what is it? Well, this active status, active buyer is the only one that doesn't make a ton of sense for the labels because we don't actually know what, they're going to be purchasing yet. So go ahead and just select standard sale. We don't have a listing date. We don't have an acceptance date yet. We don't have any of the contingency dates in here. You can put all of this in. The benefit of putting this stuff in here as you set up your file, which takes an extra few minutes, is it's going to send you reminders. So if you put in when the earnest money deposit date is, as far as when it needs to be in, it's going to send you a calendar reminder reminding you that, hey, the buyer should have or should be putting in the earnest money by today. It'll help you with the other contingencies as well if you put in the date that they're supposed to be um, released. So I highly recommend using that. It's a good tool. Other info, this helps us with catering the checklist because there's going to be some if applicable items on the checklist. And if we have to go searching for this property to find out how old it is and different things like that, it takes extra time on our end. And then the files move along slower. If you just put in here that it's a 1990, okay, well, we know up front that we can just delete off the earthquake and the lead-based paint. That's not going to be a requirement on this file. Um, you could put in the home warranty side if you want, or none. If you put in none, then we're going to remove the requirement for the home warranty receipt. You could put in your client's names, list price, sales price, all of that, financing type. Go ahead and find your name in here. This is a test account, so I am going to be Mr. Test Account. And we'll go ahead and create the transaction. And you'll see that it uploaded the buyer representation checklist. So on that, you can see what is required, which is a red dot, and then what is required if applicable, which is red dot, yellow dot. So yellow is going to be if applicable, red is going to be a requirement. So we're going to be looking for that in order to close this file. So I'm hoping that the visual representation of the colored dots that we added in on this will help with any confusion of, well, I don't know if that's required or not. Now I think it's a lot clearer what is going to be required, and you can see essentially this is just the buyer rep package. All of this stuff here is in the buyer rep package except for any modification of terms, which you may or may not have. And if you don't have it, that's going to get removed off the checklist. Pre-approval letter, proof of funds, we do need to have that in the file because it's actually part of the offer. As you're writing your offer, you can see in there in the RPA that it gives a timeline of, it says pre-approval is attached or within X amount of days. Proof of funds is attached or will be provided in X amount of days. Being that it's attached and you're sending those items over with your signed purchase agreement, it is part of the agreement and we need to have those on file. That's why we ask for those. So let's say we have um, we have an offer accepted and we need to update our checklist now and our status. So you'll just go back over here to edit transaction. And now we're going to place it into a pending sale status. And you can go ahead and put in your acceptance date. You can put it for the 11th. You can put in your close date. Again, this is all date reminders that will help you throughout the transaction. You can go ahead and put in your earnest money due date, inspection due date. I'm just going to throw in a few dates here. Year built, we'll call it we'll call it a 1990. How about that? We're going to say there's no home warranty. Um, list price, we'll call it 800,000. Sale price, we'll call it 775. Now, adding in the sales price helps us when we're creating the CDA. Otherwise, we have to start looking through the file and seeing what price you actually ended up at. So it really helps us when we're going through these files if you can fill out these numbers. Otherwise, we have to go searching for it, and it slows down the file cert process, and it slows down getting a CDA out to you if you're requesting one. Financing type, going to put that in there. Nothing's changed on the agents. We're not doing any dual agency. We'll go ahead and save. And now you can see that it added in some additional checklists. So, because we're still doing a standard sale, so we didn't have any extra ones. No, there was no trust or anything. That additional checklists. There's some additional mini checklists in here that we may add to your file if we come across it and see that it needs to be added. Unfortunately, you can only check one transaction status. So even though maybe two of them might apply, just check at least one of them. You can make a note to us if you want. But same thing applies here. Now we have the sale checklist representing the buyer. We're looking for the MLS printout and the CRS report. Why do we ask for that? The main reason we ask for that is, again, it helps us tailor the list down a little bit because it is a somewhat general checklist that you're seeing in here. Otherwise, we would have 1,000 checklists in here and you'd spend all day trying to figure out which one applies to your transaction. So it's easier for us to just have the general, requirements and then tick off some that don't apply. And we can tell that when we look at the MLS printout because we can say, oh, well, we see there's an HOA in here. So I'm going to need to add in the HOA one, meaning we're going to require the buyer homeowner association advisory. The PSD, would that be required? No, you can see that that's orange. Orange is advised, meaning, hey, we'd like to have that in the file. It's not a requirement. Same thing with CC&Rs. Would we like to have it? Yes, we're advising you to get them, but we're not going to not certify the file if they're not in there because sometimes you don't get a PSD. Usually I only see those if it's a condo sale. They could actually apply to a single family home too, that's in a community where, maybe they have, um, some additional RV parking and storage, or maybe one of the restrictions is no overnight parking or something like that, or you can't park in your driveway overnight. So It could apply to single family homes as well, detached. You'll see we have same setup through here. Um, we have the RPA bundle right here at the top. We have any of these, and they are required if applicable because you probably might not get to buyer counteroffer number two. If you only get to, buyer counteroffer one or SCO one, then we'll certify that and we'll delete off the other ones. If it's an FHA VA sale, then these would be a requirement. If it is not a FHA VA sale, then they're going to get removed. Lead-based paint, same thing. You see that it's required if applicable. So if the home was built after the 1978, it's just going to get removed from the checklist. So hopefully the visual is a little bit better now for everybody. We kind of shortened up this buyer checklist and broke it up a little bit so it's a little easier to see. We put all the addendums into a separate checklist because you might end up not having any of these, and in which case we'll delete this whole checklist off at the end. But you might end up having some of them, addendums and COPs and things like that. These are all addendums to the purchase agreement. The amendments are in their own section as well. And then we have the title and escrow checklist. This really didn't change. You see the green box, that means that that does require a broker signature, and it is also required. So if you send those to me individually, you will get them signed much faster. If you send them to me individually through DocuSign or e-signature service, you'll get them the same day. If you don't get it from me, um, pretty promptly, it probably means I didn't receive it. So I usually get everything signed by the end of the day, usually within about an hour though. And then you see at the end is the buyer representation checklist. So hopefully by this time that one's already closed because you've already turned in everything. If you're on the listing side, it's going to work the same way. After you put in your listing and make it, in active status, well, we can. Oh, I can't delete the checklist from here. I have to do it from my end. I'd have to create a new transaction. So when it's going to work the same way, you put in your listing, put it into active or coming soon status. It's going to provide the listing checklist only of the required listing docs. And after you put it into a pending sale, then it's going to add in basically all of this same stuff you see right here, but it's going to give you a representing seller side uh, sales checklist, which is just slightly different. Um, so yeah, hopefully you guys like the updates and it's a little easier to visualize what is actually required, what do you have left on the file, what we would like to see, what we have to see, and I guess, give us some feedback. We have the residential stuff done first because this is kind of a whole overhaul on the back end. I wanted to see how this went and get some feedback from everybody to see if it's a little easier to work with. And then we'll update the commercial and the land checklist as well. So give us some feedback. You can shoot me an email, text, whatever. Hate it, love it. Maybe add this, get rid of that. I don't, whatever it is. Constructive criticism helps us make it better. So other than that, we're at about time, and hopefully that helps with getting your files turned in and getting CDAs out a little faster. Always contact us with any questions, and I don't see any in the chat. Oh, I do see a few. Oh, I see a few actually. Sorry. Oh, back from the AVID. I didn't get a notification on these. So if you see a finger smudge on the wall or marks at height of a dog or chin, front paint or chip front paint or worn floor. Yeah. So in Megan's law disclosure, in the example you gave us, does the seller have an obligation to state that they themselves? are on the Megan's list, or TDS or SPQ. There's no question for that in the TDS or SPQ. So fill out what is required on those. Sorry, the phone's kind of blowing up today. All right, so yep, so that'll wrap it up for today. If you have any questions, I'm always around. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week.